All right, good morning, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about Django associations. This is going to be a little bit of a change of pace since we definitely have a different instructor teaching this information. And as you all have noticed, Adam and I go at very different paces when it comes to teaching. I am going to do my best to slow myself down, but like always, if at any point you notice I am going way too fast or I'm just speaking and somebody needs me to slow down, please just let me know and I'll do my best to step on the brakes a little more. All right, so let's go over associations here. Now, in Django, we've gone over creating an independent database or an independent data table, I apologize, called Pokemon. And here we're storing all of our data for specific Pokemon. But we know that, or at least if you've played the games, you know that Pokemon also require something like items. And items will require their own data table since they have their own parameters. Um, and there's also something like stats that could fall into Pokemon if you want to keep them separate from the Pokemon itself. And there's also Pokemon moves, things that they can utilize to be able to attack other Pokemon whenever they are in battle. Right? This is just a small scope of different tables that we can create to make sure that our Pokemon game or our Pokemon API is actually coming to life. Now, when we create all of these items and we create all of these stats or moves or all these other tables together, we need to find a way so that a Pokemon can be able to hold items, right? And as you all know, an item can only be held by one Pokemon. This is something known as a one-to-one relationship. Now, moves. How do moves work? Well, when moves are created, we know that there's many moves and they can be learned by many different Pokemon. So for example, I could have something like, um, oh man, I am going to get
Pepper.
fun up for this, but let's say I have Hunter, I believe that's his name, and I have Mewtwo, both on my team, right? And both of them know how to utilize Shadow Ball. Well, those are two completely different Pokemon that know the same move of Shadow Ball. So what kind of relationship would that be?
Many to many, I'm guessing.
Yeah, we would have a many-to-many relationship where many Pokemon can know many moves, and many moves can belong to many Pokemon. All right, so we could just switch this. Let's go ahead and take that one arrow away, and let's go ahead and make this a many-to-many relationship there. Now, a trainer may also own many Pokemon. So if I were to have something as a separate table named trainer, well, many Pokemon can belong to one trainer. Oh, let me go ahead and flip this arrow here. So that would give us finally our many to one relationship. Right, so there's our relationships and kind of how they work, how they relate to one another in just the realm of Pokemon. We'll take a look at a couple of different examples, but today we're going to go over actually making this connection from one table to our Pokemon and maybe creating a couple of these other tables to ensure that we're able to have all of these connections in our Pokemon API. All right, let's go into our lesson here. So here we have the Django RM associations. And here we have a type of association where we're going to be referencing an airport and we have a passport which can only belong to one person. One person cannot have multiple passports, and one passport cannot belong to multiple people. So that's going to be our one-to-one association. Does anyone have any questions regarding this one-to-one? Pretty straightforward, right? Let's go ahead and take a look at that in code. Here in code, I created an associations project so that we can quickly take a look at these examples and see them as to what they look like in code. Here I have my class of passport, which just has a number, which you can see I pass it as a char field. And then I have a person that has a name and age. Nothing particularly special to go over these, and we're not going to go through the process of creating serializers and all these other, well, we will actually create serializers here shortly, but we're not going to add validators or go into any of the crazy stuff that goes into building models since we want to concentrate on the associations portion. Well, now that we have our passport and our person, what we can do is we can create an extra field. Well, when a passport is created, I want it to belong to a person. So I can say, hey, the person that this is going to belong to will be of models dot one to one field. Now this is saying I want to connect one passport to one person. Now, when I'm connecting these two, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and say, well, what model is it that I want to connect it to? I want to connect it to the model of person. And you can see that it's giving me a bit of an issue there, saying that it doesn't exist. So pay attention to when you're creating your fields. I just need to move it up above so that it's able to identify that person already exists. So now I'm making that connection saying, well, what I want you to do is I want you to connect a passport to an independent person. But there's a couple of other things that I wanted to handle. Well, I can give it an on delete command. What does that mean? Well, when I pass in an on delete and models.cascade, what I am asking Django to do is I'm asking it that if at any point a person is created and they have a passport, when that person is deleted from the database, so will their passport be deleted from the database. That's all it's saying. It is cascading. If a person leaves, every model connected to said person will also leave along with it. All right. Or any model that has this on cascade command. So now Django knows how to handle that connection. In case I lose a person, I will also lose said passport. Well, what else could I do? As of right now, I could reference a person through a passport. But can I reference a passport through a person?
Not right now because you didn't you do a one-to-one to it.
Right. Awesome. Good catch, Jack. So I could possibly, right, or theoretically, one would assume that I could add something like, hey, I want there to be a passport here. And in that passport, I could maybe add a models one-to-one field. But that would cause there to be a repetitive loop or an inside loop, and it wouldn't be able to actually understand what it is that we're trying to achieve. So let me show us that error here. So I'm going to make a passport, and I'm going to say models dot one-to-one field. And a quick workaround if you're having troubles with being able to recognize packages is you could actually pass it in parentheses and just say, hey, this is going to reference the passport model. And we'll say on delete models dot cascade. Let's see what error comes from this. So clearly I'm within my shell, and I'm going to run the make migrations command to cause an error. All right, so there's my error. So it's telling me there's an issue identified, and then it tells me, hey, there's a reverse accessor person passport for one-to-one passport field that clashes with a field name of one-to-one passport person passport. So essentially it's telling me you're creating this connection between person and passport twice. Okay, well, how do I address that? I need to be able to access a passport through a person, and Django knows I need to be able to access a passport through a person. And instead of creating an entirely different table to be able to connect these, what I can do is I can pass a related name field of passport. And in doing so, I essentially create line 8 that is commented out without actually typing it in. Now, let's go ahead and make our migrations. Right, no problem at all. All right, so now our migrations have been made. Once I've made our migrations, let's go ahead and migrate this into our actual database. Let's take a look at what we just created. Now, in our database, if we run \D, we're going to go ahead and see that we have our many-to-many, our one-to-one, and so on. So now I'm going to select all from one-to-one and take a look at the person. There we can see they have ID, name, and age. There's no field for passport, but we'll be able to access it, and I'll show that here shortly. And let's go ahead and take a look at our passport. And our passport actually holds the person ID, the field that we created for the person ID. So our passport's what's holding the connection, but we created a reverse way for a person to be able to access it by adding this related name field component. All right, let's take a look at that. I'm going to go ahead and go into my server here. Or excuse me, not into my server. I'm going to go into my shell. And inside of my shell, I'm going to import this information. So I'm going to say from one-to-one dot models. I want to import all. That should give me access to a person. So I'm going to say person is equal to, just going to name as person1, be equal to person, where name is, let's go with Jack, and age is 24. All right, let's go into person1.save. Make sure that gets into the database. Okay, so I get a field expected ID, but got Jack. All right. No problem at all. All right, now Jack has been saved. If we go into persons, we have Jack. It has now been saved into my database. Now let's go ahead and create a passport. This passport will have a number, which is a char field. And to make sure and add an ID as well. And then it needs to have a connection to a person. Well, I know my person ID is 1, or I could just pass in person 1. I'm going to passport1.save. Okay, so that did not work as expected. I need to pass in the ID component, and now I was able to actually save it, or excuse me, the ID attribute. And now I was able to actually save it. Well, let's go into our database and make sure that that passport, in fact, does exist. So there we have a passport and we have a person. Well, now if I go into a select query, or I go ahead and let me go ahead and exit this field here. And let's go back into our Python shell. Let's go ahead and grab our passport. Let's say from one-to-one dot models import all. And now let's grab that passport. Passport is equal to passport dot objects dot first. And let's just have passport get printed into my server. So there in passport, I can see that I have an actual passport object that just got extracted from my database. Let's see what happens if I go into passport.person. Well, if I go into passport.person, notice that it gives me a one-to-one reference there. So I can even say passport.person Oh, excuse me. I referenced the wrong passport. And now I spelled it wrong. There you go. And you can see that it tells me that there's an object there. Now it's referencing that person. I can even grab the name attribute from it. I can say passport.person.name. And when I run this code, what do we think it's going to return?
Jack.
Yeah, we'll see Jack. The bridge has been connected there. All right, so let's go ahead and comment. I'm gonna grab this code here and I'm gonna go ahead and paste it here, comment it out so that we can all see it and that it's there. Well, how do we make the connection backwards? Right? Well, if I grab the person now, and I say, hey, I want to see the person.name, well, that returns Jack. But now what if I want to access the number of my passport? Well, let's run person.passport because that's my related name field that I created. That returns a passport object. And I can do the same thing. Related person.passport.number. That would give me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's the bridge between both of my one-to-one connections. All right. Does anyone have any questions about this one-to-one field?
I understand it in essence what you're doing. Why are you using person.object.first instead of just passing in an index number?
Passing in an index number as in get where ID is equal to 1?
Yeah.
It's just the way that I decided to query the database. Since I know there's only one object inside of the database or inside of the data table for both person and passport, I just grab the dot first. That just grabs the very first entry into the table.
Okay, that's threw a little bit of confusion because I've never seen that before.
Got it. I apologize. All right. Any other questions?
I have a question. If you were to just show the person table, does it show that passport in that table as well? Or do you have to specifically like query for it?
Yeah, it does not, right? So here's the person table. The person table does not have any connection to the passport. Django is handling that reverse connection by adding that related name field. So Django is doing that for us under the hood without us having to create a separate table inside of the database. Any other questions?
I guess I'm kind of curious. So when you enter the shell, I notice how you always have to, import, the module and all that. But I could imagine, like, with a much more complicated program, how complicated that would get if you always had to type in like a bunch of imports. Is there any way around that, or maybe an upgrade version of the shell in those kinds of instances?
So if you have a lot of models or a lot of things that you have to import from one file, I would just import all. So you could say from, in this case, I believe the one that we're working with was one-to-one. So from one-to-one dot models. And instead of saying, hey, import each one individually, I can just say import star. And that imports every class or function inside of the file.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. It doesn't seem like there are any questions. So let's go over into our serializer portion. So here in our serializer, I'm going to go ahead and create a serializer for my person. It's going to be a model serializer with a class meta, where the model will be referencing to will be the person. And then here we can say fields is equal to underscore underscore all. Now let's go ahead and exit the shell again and repeat the process, right? We enter the shell, we import all of our information. So we say from 1 to 1 dot serializers, import all, and that will grab all of my models because I'm importing all of my models as well. And here I can go ahead and grab my person. So person 1 is equal to person dot objects dot first. I can take a look at person 1. All right, so person 1 worked. Let's say person 1 serializer is equal to the person serializer, where the data that I'm passing is going to be person 1. All right, so now let's take a look at the person 1 serializer dot data. And there we can see we have ID, name, and age. Well, that's all great and everything, but it's not really giving me my connection for a one-to-one field. So how do I go ahead and bring that in? Right? I want to make sure that I can see my passport being included in here. What I need to do is I need to create a passport serializer. That passport serializer will then be of a model serializer that will have a class meta. The model it is going to reference to will be passport. And the fields it will have will be of all. Now what I can pass in here, instead of passing in fields all, well, actually this might work. Let's go ahead and add the model for passport now. Well, I can say passport will be referenced to by the passport serializer. So let me go ahead and exit this information here. I'm actually going to copy the import command so I don't have to do it all over again. I apologize. The shell is a little bit difficult in the fact that every time we bring it up, we have to import everything and rewrite all the code. All right, so there's everything from serializers. I'm going to go ahead and grab my person. I'm just going to do person 1 serialized. Now I'm going to utilize my person serializer, where the data it will hold will be from person dot objects dot first. Now I can take a look at the person 1 dot data. All right, and in the person 1 dot data, notice that because I added the passport as one of the attributes, well, now I see ID, which belongs to the person. And now there's a field of passport, which didn't exist before. The field of passport now holds all of the data nested within it, where we have the ID, number, and person. Now, where else have we seen that? If we take a look at the Poke API, which I'm sure we're getting kind of tired of seeing it by now, inside of the Poke API, well, base experience is part of this original request, where we're just grabbing things from Ditto. So base experience is a row that belongs to the original table. But abilities is a connection. It's either a many-to-many or a one-to-many that is nested within it. And the serializer is grabbing all that information and plugging it in as a nested array. In this case, because it's a one-to-one, it doesn't come back as a nested array. Instead, it comes back as a nested object. Does anyone have any questions regarding serializers?
I am completely lost, to be honest with you. This feels more like a review demo than an initial instruction, so you're going really fast, and it's a lot of information to just kind of take in.
Got it. All right. So let me go ahead and refresh this and start over from the beginning.
Hey, am
And
I the only one? Because if not, if I'm the only one, I'll watch this again and review it later. I don't want to hold up everybody else. I just want to know how everybody else is feeling about this.
Yeah, I think for this part,
Uh,
it does seem a little bit more reviewy. Definitely like connecting the tables is new though, for sure.
I mean, I'm tracking.
got
Yeah,
no issues.
I feel like I'm getting it, but of course the hands-on will help. But I mean, I know hands-on comes later.
Well, let me go ahead and push forward into our next model. We're going to see this in a repetitive way once we start working with our many to one and many to many. So let me put, or we'll see it again repetitive in the many to one, in the many to one. I'll slow down for that portion. And then if after the many to one, we have a little bit of questions, we'll go ahead and pause for a second and make sure that we're good to go before we push forward into our many to many.
All right.
Awesome. All right. So this is going to conclude our one-to-one relationships here. If we move forward to our many to one, you'll see that our many to one, in our example, we have luggages, right? Many bags of luggage can belong to one person, but they can't belong to multiple people. When you go to the baggage claim, they always have you register one person for the bag. Now you'll notice there's a little bit of a change in syntax here. When we created our one-to-one relationship, the quite literal command was one-to-one field. But when we have a many-to-one relationship, we don't utilize a many-to-one field. We utilize a foreign key. That's just Django's way of associating many-to-one. We don't have to go into a discussion as to why they decided to go with foreign key rather than writing many-to-one. It's just how it works, right? We have our models.foreign key. That's what develops our many-to-one relationship. So let's take a look at that. Looks like we have an add from the Pokey API there. Let's go into our models for our many-to-one. And here we have a separate example where we're talking about schools and students. Now, many students can go to one school. So where should the relationship live? Should it live within the student or should it live within the school?
student.
Within the student, yeah.
Okay, the student. Now, what makes us say that?
Because many students can go to one school, so the relationship from the many is within the students.
Got it. So when it comes to deciding where the connection should be held, I would think about it in the way of how you want data to be deleted or want data to be handled in case something is missing inside of your database. So for example, if we make a connection at the school level and many students can go to one school, well, what happens when a student is removed? That would mean
It
The
deletes the
school would be
school.
removed? Okay.
it would delete the school, right? Which means a bunch of students wouldn't have a school to attend. Now, if a school is removed and our relationship is living at the student level, then all of the students that belong to that one school would then be removed from the database, which makes sense, right? That's the data flow that we want. So we're going to make sure that we go into our student and we add the school. Now here in the school, I'm going to go ahead and pass in models.foreign key relationship, where my foreign key will be in reference to the school. We just discussed that on delete, I would like for my models to cascade, meaning that I want them to all delete. And then I need to pass a related name field to build that bridge. In this case, I'm going to name it students, because we're going to have more than just one, right? Many students are going to belong to the school. So in my serializer, I would want there to be a list of dictionaries, not just one listed dictionary. And that's going to give me the field down below of students, which should return a list of objects, where every object will represent a student instance. All right, let's go ahead and exit. Let's make our migrations. All right, so there's our migrations that have been made. Now let's apply the same migration, set migrations. All right. Now for this portion, I'm going to go ahead and utilize the admin site just to make it a little bit less confusing and have more visual here. Oh, looks like I may have to create a new one. No biggie. All right, let's refresh this. Let's go with FR and FR. There you go. So let's go into our schools. Currently, we don't have a school, so I'm going to create one. I'm just going to name this Code Platoon. I'm going to save it. So now Code Platoon exists. Now I'm going to go into students. One too many, .bio. No, it doesn't exist. What is happening there? Okay, let me go ahead and do something real quick. Making all these different migrations is messing with my database. All right. All right, so let's go ahead and add a school here. Here in my school, I'm going to name it Code Platoon. Okay, so it's saved. I go into my students, and I want to generate a student. Here, the student will be Francisco. The age will be 24. Bio, I'm just going to put some gibberish in there. And you'll notice that for school, I now get a drop-down menu of what school it is that I want to attend. Or I can save and add another. Well, when I save and add another, I'm going to go ahead and add Adam. Let's say that he's 30. Again, put some gibberish. And I could again choose a school which he'll belong to. So now I have two students that belong to one school. And that's my one-to-many relationship. Again, I created a foreign key relationship. I say which model it is that I want that foreign key relationship to be related to. I specify how I want to handle the database in case my parent relationship gets deleted. So if the school gets deleted, the student related to said school will also be deleted. And then I pass a related name field so that school has a backwards access to all the students. All right.
So the real only difference between the one-to-one and the one-to-many is the literally you're calling either 1 to 1 field or foreign key field, model foreign key field.
Yes, that's exactly. Of
Okay, thank you.
course. All right. Well, let's take a look at our serializer. See what that looks like there. Now, in my serializer, I want to grab the school. How do I create a serializer? Actually, let's start off with the student. How do I create a serializer for the student?
It would be class and then student serializer. And then you want to pass through the serializers, dot model serializers, which we also need to import from framework, maybe. But yeah, it's serializers, dot model serializer, and then class meta with model equals student, and then the fields that you want.
I'm gonna actually just exclude the school ID, which I believe is just the one that I don't want. So I want to exclude student. All right, so there's my model there. Let's go ahead and make sure that it works.
Do you not have to pass through model or serializers dot model serializer?
I imported it this way, so I grabbed REST framework.serializer,
Ah, okay,
import model
okay,
serializers, rather than from REST framework import serializers.
okay.
Right, so I'm going to go into my shell here, and in my shell, I'm going to take a look at that student serializer. Actually, one serializers, import all, and then from there I can go ahead and say student serializer equal to student serializer, where the data will be student dot objects dot first. And now I can take a look at the student serializer data. Function must be a list or a tuple. Okay, that's fine. All right. Well, I made a mistake, so I'm gonna have to redo this here. All right, so now I grabbed all my information there. Let's go into the student serializer. Which brings in from the student dot objects dot first. And now I can grab the data. So there it shows me the data for the student of Francisco. So there I can see the ID, name, the age, and bio. Now, how do I create a serializer for my school? Let me put these side by side there.
Pretty much the same as the student serializer, but you'll just change it to class school serializer and pass in model serializer, class meta, and then model equals school, and then fields, probably that all thing.
All right, so we'll do fields to all. All right. Now, here we have a one-to-many relationship. So how can I see a list of all of my students inside of my school?
Don't you have to like pass in the student model into the school serializer?
Okay, so we take a look at our one-to-one relationship here between passport and our person serializer. We can see that we passed it in as an attribute, right? So if we try to mimic that same information there, I'm going to go ahead and put in students is equal to the student serializer. But there is a difference here. Now, between passport and person, what was the relationship there?
1-to-1.
Okay, and in this case, between my students in school, what's the relationship between those?
Many-to-1.
Right. So if I'm passing in many data entries into the serializer, what argument do I need to pass into this class serializer before it's actually activated?
Would it be
Well,
student
true.
Two people started speaking and then you guys overrode each other. Can someone say something?
Would you put in many equals true inside student serializer?
Yeah, I would pass in many is equal to true. All right, well, let's take a look at this. I'm gonna go ahead and exit. I'm gonna enter my shell. And from here, I'm gonna go ahead and import all. So from 1 to 1, serializers, import all. And I want to take a look at my school. I want to see what that looks like. I'm going to say school serializer, where school.objects.first, that's grabbing the very first school. And I just want to see the data attribute of that. Well, now we can see we have an ID of 1. We have students, which holds a list of dictionaries for both myself and Adam. And then the name of the school, which is Code Platoon. All within my shell. And that's the many-to-one relationship. All right, before we move on into our many-to-many, does anyone have any questions regarding relationships between one-to-one and many-to-one?
Is there a reason, I guess, like the order, like why students show up before the name of the school?
Not to my knowledge. No, if you want to control the order as which it falls into, you could just specify the fields and say, hey, I want to see the ID, I want to see the name, and then last, I want to see students. And that will clarify the order. So let me go ahead and demonstrate that here. So now it gives me the ID, name, and then students last. So I could control the order that I wanted to if I specify within fields. If I just pass in all, then Django's just going to handle it in whatever way it thinks it makes sense.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Do
Any
you go
other?
to your file path real quick?
Go to my
I
file.
sorry, in VS Code, your directory structure to show it.
Oh, absolutely.
And each one of these, your one-to-one here, that is your app name.
Yes, this is an app name,
Okay. That was got it. Thank you.
of course.
Is the whole purpose of a serializer is to convert a, for example, student class instance into just a regular dictionary?
Yes, the purpose of the serializer is to turn our query set, which comes back from the database as a class instance, into JSON readable data that we can send over HTTP requests and responses.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much.
Of course, no problem. All right. Any other questions regarding relationships of one-to-one or many-to-one? All right. If there aren't any other questions, then let's move on into our last form of relationship here, which is going to be our many-to-many. In this case, we have it where many authors can be within many books, and many books can belong to many authors. Well, the way we add a many-to-many relationship is, and in this case, since it's a many-to-many, it actually doesn't matter where it's being held. So here we're going to go ahead and add a book. I'm going to make this a models dot many to many field. And I can specify that I want it to be related to the book class. I can also, this one will not take an on delete field because what this will interpret to will be a set of IDs. But what I can pass is a related name of authors.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, let's hear it.
So we have like models dot one to one field, models dot many to many field, and models dot foreign key field.
Yes. All right. Awesome. And let's go ahead and take a look here. So many passengers can board many flights as they're traveling. All right. Let me make sure that that goes into questions. Okay, perfect. All right. So then we have our book. It has our association, but something different is going to happen this time. I'm going to go ahead and run this information. So I'm going to go ahead and drop the database and make all the migration changes that I need to. Right, so that takes care of my database there. I dropped it and then created it. Now I'm going to go ahead and make my migrations for this many-to-many project. You can see that they have been made. Now I'm going to actually migrate. Everything has been migrated. I'm going to create a super user again. And my shell should still be running. Let's make sure that is actually running. Everything is good there. Now let's take a look at what happened within SQL this time. Now within SQL, we take a look here. We can see that we have a many-to-many author. There's a many-to-many author book table. And then there's a many-to-many author book ID sequence. And then finally, we have a many-to-many book. Well, there's a third table that was just created here called many-to-many author book. Let's take a look at that. Let's go into select all from many-to-many author book. Well, there's an ID with an author ID and a book ID. So what Django just did, here we have our many-to-many example. Django just recognized, hey, well, we have a many-to-many field, but there needs to be a way to relate these two to one another. Now we know that in PostgreSQL, there's no way to just have that inside of one field. We would have to make a connecting table. So Django takes care of that for us. It creates a table that we don't see that tracks where a Pokemon ID is connected to a move ID. And this table, we never ourselves have to create it because, again, it is handled by Django. So Django is creating it for us under the hood, making our many-to-many relationship. That's what we see
So
here.
that's like a join table then?
Exactly. All right, it's working to connect my moves and Pokemon.
I don't know if I missed it, but does it matter where you put that many-to-many field if it creates the join table anyway?
It does not matter where you put it because it's going to have an independent connection and it doesn't have an on-delete function.
Cool, thank you.
Of course. All right. So let's go into how do we create some of these fields, right? So far we have our students. Let's go into, our authors and books. Let's go into our authors. Oh. And in our authors, let's go ahead and create a couple. Let's do Francisco. He's not going to have any. Oh, it's asking me to create a book there. Interesting. Let's go ahead and create a book. So a book is going to be, I don't know, let's just call it text stacks here. Save and add another. Let's do React. New 15. Full stack. And for that one, we'll do 60. Well, there's our book 1, book 2, and book 3. Well, now we can go into authors and say, hey, Francisco. And here it tells me exactly how to use it. It says hold down Control or Command on a Mac to select more than one. Well, I want Francisco to author both book 1 and book 3. So now I could save and add another. And I want Adam to author book 1 and book 2. I want Nick to author book 3 and book 2. And then let's go ahead and say that I want Ralph to author all 3 books. So now I have my 4 authors. All of them have been created. And I have my 3 books. All of them holding the connection. Let's take a look at our data table now. Well, now you can see that I have entries. These are just specific entries that were entered. And I have the author ID. Well, Francisco authored book 1 and book 3. Adam authored book 1 and book 2. Nick authored book 2 and book 3. And then we have Ralph, which authored books 1 through 3. All of them happening at the connecting table. Does anyone have any questions during that many-to-many connection? All right, now the serializer is where it gets tricky. So when we create our serializer, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go ahead and make a serializer for the book first. We say models.model serializer. Oh, excuse me. This is just model serializer. I'm going to go ahead and move over here because that's throwing me off. And this is just going to have a class meta where the model will be referencing to will be the book model. And the fields it will show will be all. Now for my authors, I want to see all of my authors that were involved in this. So I'm going to go ahead and pass in the author serializer, which holds a model serializer. Again, this is going to have a class meta, where the model will be the author. And the fields, again, will be all. Now, I say this works different because we're not going to be able to just reference the book serializer. Instead, what we have to do is we actually have to pass in a method that will serialize all of this information. So I'm going to say, hey, for authors, or excuse me, for books, because that's our reverse Oh, I don't have a reversed. I named it book. Okay, so for book, what I have there is going to be a serializer method. So I'm going to come up here and import the serializer method field. And go ahead and make sure that gets emphasized there. That's the serializer method field coming from Rust framework .serializers. Now that serializer method field is going to automatically look for a get books with the following convention. As a method. This is the default behavior of serializer method field. It will take this first book and attach this get to it so that it's looking for that method. All right, well, let's specify how this is going to work. I'm going to say get book. And this should be books. The reason why it's get book is because I unfortunately named it as book instead of pluralizing it. I apologize, everyone, but this should have an S at the end of it. This get book, this is a class, so we're back to OP. What would be the first argument that I pass into this?
Self.
Yeah, would pass in self. Then I'm going to reference the instance. This is the instance of author that will be passed into the serializer. All right. So now I have my author. Well, how do I return my information in a serialized manner? Well, I can say that all of my books is equal to my book serializer, where author, let me make sure that that is what I gave it there. I gave it authors. Interesting. Let me go ahead and pass it this way. I'm going to follow the curriculum in this case just to make sure that I'm not passing anything weird. So I'm going to go into the instance, go into the attached name, which in this case is authors. I'm going to pass in all. All right, so there's my authors. This will be book. The instance is the author. All right. So that grabs a list of books. Now I can serialize them. And I can say book serializer. Grabs my books. And this has a many equals true attribute. And then finally, I can return my book serializer dot data. So let's take a look at how that works. I'm going to go into my shell. And I'm going to import from my serializers. So go ahead and import all. And there, I'm just going to grab one author. I'm going to grab Francisco in this case. Let's pass in author1.name. You'll see that that returns Francisco. But now let's pass that through our serializer. let's say author, serializer is going to take in author1 dot data. Now when we run it, we can see that we have the ID of 1 for the author, where the book has both the books that Francisco was authored in, which in this case was Django and the full stack book, book 1 and 3, and then the name of the author for Francisco. So we just have to write a specific method that will handle this set. We can't just pass in the many equals true or attempt to reference the serializer. It's going to throw an error. The reason why it does this is because it's determined as a set. So it needs to preload the information here on line 49. That's us preloading that information. We're grabbing all from that set, returning that data query. Rather than just working with a set of integers, now we have a set of instances, which we then pass into the book serializer and return set data. Now, many-to-many can be a little bit confusing, so I'm going to go ahead and stop here for quite a bit. Does anyone have any questions regarding this many-to-many relationship?
Can you go over where that? So I understand the instance is referencing the author. Can you go back to the table that is in, like the author?
The author itself?
Yeah, yeah. So I guess I'm just a bit confused on that getter method.
Okay, got it. So this is remember the instance is referencing to the author, right? Because this is our author serializer. In this book.all, what we're essentially saying is from the author instance, I want to access the attribute of book, which in this case, it's a model that is a many-to-many. So dot books dot all. And what this is saying is select all from books where author ID is equal to, where author ID is equal to author ID. And let's say this is book author ID. That way there's a little bit of difference there. That's all it's
Okay, that makes sense.
awesome. Just enter that there. All right. Any other questions?
Is it automatically calling get book whenever you call author serializer?
Yes. The reason why it's automatically calling get book is because here we have a serializer method field. So it takes this book portion and just adds get underscore under it. So it knows that what it's looking for is a get book method.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Any other questions? All right, if there aren't any questions, I've been pushing for a while, and I think it's time we get some hands-on on the keyboard. We'll go back and revisit our Pokemon API and apply this knowledge to our Pokemon API during part 2 of our lecture here in an hour. But for now, currently the time on deck is 10:06. Let's come back at 11:06 and continue on with part 2 of our lecture so we can get some hands-on keyboard. Thank you so much, everyone, and I'll ensure to push this up into demos and notes here. All right, welcome back, everyone. Before we left, we just finished talking about associations. So let's go ahead and finish the loop here by going back over into our Pokemon API and actually applying some of the information that we've learned so far. So I'm going to go ahead and close all of these different, I'm still going to need my Pokédex, shouldn't need this database anymore, and I will not need this shell. All right. So now I'm going to change directory 1 back and go into my Pokédex project. Now, in my Pokédex project, I do want to create a new many-to-many field. And what this many-to-many field is going to look like is it's going to have a moves app. So I'm going to go ahead and create this app here. I'm inside of my Pokédex project. I'm going to go into Python, manage py, start app. I'm going to call it the move app. I'll go ahead and move into my settings.py. Make sure that the move app is added. And then I'll go ahead and create my model here. So in my move app, I'm going to go ahead and import all of the information that I need. So I'm going to say from Django.core, import validators as V. I am also going to import my exceptions. To import validation error. All right, here I'm going to go ahead and create a little bit of a validation. Or excuse me, my model, and then I'll create my validation somewhere else. Take that off here. All right, so I'm going to create my model class of move, which is going to be of models.model. This will have a name, which will be a char field. This will have an accuracy score, which will be a positive integer field. Then we have PP and power. Which is also a positive integer field. All right. So now I'm going to go ahead and add a dunder method here so that I can identify this model clearly. This is going to take self and return an F string where I'll see self.name. I will also see the accuracy. And let's go ahead and add the power. Now let's go through the process of adding a little bit of validation. This is not a validation class, so I'm not going to try to take the time to go into this too much. So let's just quickly add some validators here. Here for my name, I'm going to add a max length of 250. I'm going to go ahead and say that blank is false and null is false. And I'll create a validator to make sure that the format of the name is always input correctly. For my positive integer field, you're going to go ahead and add a validators where my validator min value will be of 1. And my max value will be of 100. All right. For PP, I'm going to go ahead and add a default value here of 20. And add some validators as well, where my min value will be 1. And my max value will be of 30. Then for power, I'll go ahead and add a default where my default will be 80. And for validators, I'm just going to go ahead and add a max value validator where the max value will be 120. All right. Now let's go ahead and actually create a validators file so that we can add a validation for the name format. I'm going to go ahead and change directory into my move app. And here I'll create a validators.py. Where from Django.core.exceptions, I'll import validation error. I'm going to go ahead and import RE as well. And then I'm going to define my validation here. So validate move. This is going to take in a name, which will be of a string. And this is going to either return a string or raise a validation error. Excuse me. Here I'm going to go ahead and define a regex. What this regex is going to be is it is going to start with any number of lowercase or uppercase letters plus, and this is going to be maybe, so it may or may not have a second iteration of any number of uppercase to lowercase number sequence. And that's going to end the string. I'll go ahead and evaluate if this is a good name by adding the match. And I'm just going to go ahead and ask regex to match the name. If we have a good name, we will then return the name. Otherwise, we're going to raise a validation error with improper name. Now I'm going to add it to my model. Now passing in validators. I'll validate move name. All right, so now I have my move model. My move model is going to work. I know that I've created my serializer, or excuse me, I haven't created a serializer just yet, but I now have my move. I want to be able to connect it in a many-to-many relationship to my Pokemon. So how would I go about doing that?
In the Pokemon model, wouldn't you have to, unless you did it and I just missed it, wouldn't you have to create like a moves attribute?
Okay, so I can do it in here. So I can go to the Pokemon model. And I can add an attribute named moves. Now this moves would be a models dot many to many field that will relate to the move and add the related name of Pokemons.
And I do have a quick question. Regarding that related name, what is that referencing again?
So by passing in related name, essentially what I'm doing is now inside of my move app, even though I didn't define it, there's now a field named Pokemons that will return a set of Pokemon IDs.
Okay, thank you.
Could you go back to the validator? I have a question about the regex that you used.
Absolutely.
Why did you start with lowercase and then go to the capital letters on that instead of the other way around? Wouldn't that mean you have to start with the lowercase and then after that it follows with capitals?
No, this is actually what this means. It's saying the condition is either lowercase or uppercase letters can start and have a mixture of lowercase and uppercase letters. And then we don't have a definitive amount. So there's that plus sign saying, hey, as many as there is. That
Oh, so Inside the brackets there, the order for the A to Z doesn't matter.
Correct.
Okay, I wasn't tracking. Thank you.
Of course. All right. So here we are. We have Pokemon IDs, Pokemon, and there's our related field. All right. Awesome. So there's our move now. We can go ahead and create a serializer for our move. So let's go ahead and create that. So in this serializer, I'm going to go ahead and import from REST framework. Dot serializers. I want to import model serializer. And then from models, I want to import move. I'm going to go ahead and create this move serializer here. I think I'm spelling that correctly. All right.
Because I after the O.
There's what?
There's that I after that L.
I knew there was a misspelling. Thank you. All right. This will have a class meta that will reference the model of move. And it's just going to return all of the fields. So I'm just going to say underscore. Now in my Pokemon, since I want to be able to see all of my moves that are connected, I'm going to go ahead and go into my Pokemon app, go into my serializer, and I'm going to go ahead and import from my move app dot serializers the move serializer. Now what this will allow me to do, if I take on my Pokemon app, I have move. So here I can say moves is equal to, I know this is going to be a serializer method field. That's up there. Oh, I see. I see what's happening there. Do for a loop. All right. And I know because I'm utilizing that method field, what I'm asking for is for there to be a method named get moves. So let's create that method. Again, this is OP, so it's going to take in self plus the instance. And what it's going to do is it's going to grab all of my moves. I am then going to serialize them. Or I can just simply return the information. I could say return move serializer. That takes in all of my moves, dot data. And I need to make sure I pass in this many equals true. All right. Awesome. So now all I need to add is the moves here in my fields. Well, let me go ahead and take a look at my Pokemon here. Let's run the select all query from Pokemon. And there we can see I have a couple of Pokemon. I have Pikachu, Charmander, Blastoise, and Eevee that all have been added. So I can go into my shell and add a couple of different moves here. All right. And if I take a look at my model, oh, I apologize. Let me take a look at my model here for my move. I have default values. I don't have a default value for accuracy. Let me go ahead and add that there. Let's do default of 80. All right. So now let's go ahead and make migrations. Let's create some moves. And then let's also take a look at what the serializer is doing. So now I'm going to go ahead and run my server. Make sure I have a super user. Oh, actually, okay, got it. Let me make migrations and actually make my migrations here. Relation move, which is either not installed or is abstract. Okay, got it. All right, so I was able to make my migrations now. And now that I have my migrations, I can go ahead and migrate. So everything's migrating to my database. If I take a look at my tables, you'll see that now I have a move app with an ID sequence that has been created. Let me go ahead and run my server. I'm going to utilize the admin site here. Looks like I don't have a user, so let me create that really quick. Run that server. And now we're able to log in. Awesome. Nothing has been registered yet, which I believe this was covered already. I apologize. Have we seen the administration portal yet? Yes? Okay, fantastic. Let me go ahead and add it to the admin site here really quick. Right, so there's our moves in Pokemon. If I take a look at Pokemon, we can see we have Eevee, Blastoise, and all of the others still hanging out. I can go to moves, and I can start adding moves. Let's go ahead and create Psychic. We can save and add another. Other than Psychic, let's say I want, let's do Water Pulse. There's always the classical Tackle, which is always good. There's Scratch. Trying to think of some off the top of my head.
Flamethrower.
There you go. That's a good one too. I could spell that. There you go. Flamethrower. What else? Let's see.
Shadow Ball.
Bolt. Shadow Bolt. All right, let's do that one too.
Shadow Ball.
Oh, Shadow Ball. Yeah. All right. So there we go. We have a couple of different moves now that are available. Well, now I can go into my Pokemon. And from my Pokemon, I can say, hey, I want Pikachu to learn a specific number of moves. And here's all my moves down below. Well, I want Pikachu to be able to learn Tackle, Scratch, and Thunderbolt. And there you go. So I can save. All right, so there's Pikachu. What about Charmander? Well, Charmander could also know Tackle, Scratch, and Flamethrower. Then we have Blastoise, which Blastoise can learn Water Pulse, Tackle, Scratch. We didn't really have many overlapping here, but oh well. Why not? Let's have him learn Psychic for demonstrational purposes. Could have added Bite. And then Eevee, which more than likely just Tackle and Scratch. All right, so there's all my Pokemon. They're able to learn some information there. If I go to P-Sequel and I take a look at my moves, you'll see that there is a moves and Pokemon table as well, just like we saw before. So I can select all from Pokemon app, Pokemon moves. There we can see our many-to-many relationships or a connecting table between our moves and our Pokemon. All right. Up to this point, does anyone have any questions? This should all be reviewed from part 1 of our lecture so far. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and actually knock into our shell. And that's not going to work. Let's knock into our shell and take a look at our serializer and how that works for our Pokemon. Say from Pokemon app dot serializers import all. And I just want to take a look at my Pokemon serializer for my very first Pokemon.
Instead of doing the first one, because you always do the first one, could you show us how to do a different one?
Absolutely. Any in mind?
I don't care, just not the first one.
All right, let's do get where name is equal to, let's go with Pikachu. All right. And then let's go to data. All right. So that was able to grab Pikachu. There we can see the ID of Pikachu. Oh, and that was our first one as well. I apologize. Let me see.
It doesn't matter. You accessed it a different way. That's fine.
Oh, okay, perfect. So there we see that we have the ID, the name of Pikachu, its current level. And then when we move on to the moves, we have a list of dictionaries. All right, so there's our many-to-many relationship applied to our Pokemon API. Does anyone have any questions over many-to-many relationships or Django associations altogether? All right, if no one has any questions, we're going to move on into part 2 of our lecture, which is going to dive into the Django server. We're going to cover URLs and how requests are being handled by Django. Before we do that, I want to give us a little breather so that we can switch topics and have a little bit of a fluency here. So currently right now it is 11:33. Let's take a 7-minute break and come back at 11:40 for part 2 of our lecture. Thank you so much, everyone. All right, welcome back, everyone. For this portion of our class, we're going to go ahead and start talking about the Django server. Well, what is the Django server? Let's see. Currently, if I take a look at my terminal is currently being occupied. Oh, geez, what is happening? There you go. My terminal is currently being occupied. If I run Python manage.py, run server, we can see that Django is currently running on port 127.0.0.1 at port 8000. And here, if I refresh my site, well, my site was able to render some information from Django. But where's this information coming from? Well, if I take a look here at my terminal, I am now saying, hey, Django has received a GET request. That GET request went to the URL of admin, Pokemon app, Pokemon, etc. And then this GET request also grabbed a JavaScript script. All right. Both of these were completed, and they were completed successfully. I know that because it's telling me that they were completed with a status of 200. Well, what's happening here? How does Django work whenever a request comes in? When you run your project runs from the project directory, not from any of the applications. It runs at the project level. And when it's running at the project level, what it takes a look at in order to know how to receive request is urls.py. And inside of this urls.py, we can see that we have an admin. Now this admin portion is this endpoint here. I've received a get request to admin. If I take all of this off and go to admin, you can see the request is being processed, and it brings me to the homepage of my admin site. So the request is sent from the client, which in this case it's Google Chrome. Kind of going back to our full stack portion. All right, so Chrome sends a request. And let me go ahead and fix my arrows here. That request goes over to the Django server. And within the Django server, what we take a look at are the URL patterns. Within urls.py. All right. So Chrome sends a request. Again, that request goes to HTTP 127. Let's just do localhost there for simplicity's sake at port 8000/admin. When Django receives this request, all it passes down to the URL patterns is the /admin. Now this gets processed by this admin class, which goes to site.urls. So if we go into the admin class, we can take a look that there's quite a bit of information that falls in there. There's a lot of classes that are being inherited in order to be able to run this information or run this admin portal here. We can take a look at the site. And that shows us the default admin site, which shows us a lazy object setup. We can just keep opening each nested information. Eventually, we're going to find an HTML template that's being rendered and a JavaScript file. Let me see if this lets me go any further. Nope, it's not going to let me go any further in. All right. Well, now, how do we handle our URL patterns? Well, earlier when we were working with Flask, we were able to create functions and specify routes that would trigger those functions. Well, we're going to do almost exactly the same behavior that we did within Flask, but now we're going to do it within Django. So we're just going to add a couple of URL patterns here, each sending us to specific functions. So I'm going to go ahead and add a path for a square. And I'm going to make a function here. Well, first, let's make a function named home. Now, these functions, although they look like functions, they're going to be referenced to moving forward as views. Now, a view is something that handles a request, or excuse me, an HTTP request, and may or may not return an HTTP response. Now that's what a view does. There's class-based views and there's functions-based views. For today, we're going to concentrate on function-based views. Now let's say that all I want this to do is I wanted to return a simple string that has an H1 element that says, hello, Zulu Platoon. That's all I wanted to render on the screen whenever I go home. Well, when I go home, maybe I want something like a path that takes me home, and the function that will be triggered will be the home function. All right. Let's take a look here. So URL pattern has a route beginning with a slash. Remove the slash as it is unnecessary if this pattern is targeted. All right, so this is just a warning. It's not something that I have to worry about. I could leave it as empty, or I could leave it as start. This is fine. Let's see what happens when I go to home now. Because currently admin is still working great. But when I go to home, we're going to see that I get an error, or I get a page not found. All right, so a GET request was sent using the URL config file in your projects.urls. We just tried this URL pattern as decoder. All right, let's remove the slash just in case. All right, so there you go. So I removed the slash and it's telling me, hey, there's an error that's happening here. And this error is happening because there's one position argument that was passed into this function, or there's 0 position arguments that were passed into this that this function is expecting, but one was passed into it. What could that argument be?
Would it be a path?
Okay, it could be a path, right? But if we take a look at our views, what is our view supposed to handle?
The HTTP request?
Nice. So what's actually being passed in here is the request. So now if I refresh it, I'm getting an error because of the string attribute. This is fine. So currently I'm trying to respond with just string. I'm now grabbing that positional argument. I'm no longer getting that error. We'll take a look at requests here shortly. But I want to return a response. So I'm going to say from Django dot URLs import HTTP, HTTP import HTTP response. I'm going to pass that in here. Right? Because not only do I want to handle HTTP requests, but I may or may not want to return an HTTP response. So quickly from Django.http, I return an HTTP response. And now I finally get hello Zulu being rendered on my screen. I can't just return string like we did with Flask. I have to specify that I am returning an HTTP response. Let's take a look at requests here. Let's take a look at the body of our request. Currently, my body comes back as a binary string that has nothing inside of it. I can take a look at the headers as well. And if I send this and I take a look at the headers of the request, we can see that it comes back with the content length if there was any content. Currently, it was text plain that was sent over, HTTP. The host that sent this information was from my local host. The connection is being kept alive, meaning this is not stateless right now. And then it tells me that it's being sent from the source of Google Chrome. And it gives you a couple of other information regarding the current machine that I'm on whenever this request is being sent. And there's even a session ID for this session of communication. All right, so that's what the request is looking like. If I were to put a body inside of this request, or like we saw earlier when we were working within JavaScript, we could add a body to our request, or we can just send GET requests utilizing Axios to grab information from an API. So that's currently what we're doing. We're building the backend portion, right? Currently, right now, I can do something like, hey, I want Axios to send a request to HTTP / localhost and at port 8000. And then I could have it in my .then method that once a response is received, I want to console.log set response. And what this would return, it would essentially return a string having h1 hello Zulu. That's what we've created. We've created the process of being able to send a request and receiving a response. Does anyone have any questions about this process up to this point?
So just like double verify that the home view is like the same as doing the axios.get, right? That's just a different wording or language basically.
So Axios is sending a request. The view is sending the response to said request. All right, so if we take a look at our server, Axios would be from Chrome, and the response would be from the server. So our view, let me take a look here. Actually, we have something in here. All right. So currently, when the request is being sent, it falls down into this pipeline. Right? The request is sent, it's received by Django, it then goes into the project, that goes into URL patterns, which triggers a view. One of these views, you can see that there's API views here. The API view may or may not make an ORM query or make a query from the database. When that query comes back, it's going to serialize the data and then return that information as a response to wherever make the request. Does that answer your question, Chase? All right. Awesome. Oh, too far. All right, so let's finish this off. Now we're going to go ahead and make a path for a square. And what I want this to do is I want this to call a function named square. I'm going to call it area square. And that's all I want to do. I just want to return a response for that. Well, if I were to build this function, it would look as such, or excuse me, this view. Again, it would take in the request. Every view will take in a request. And I'm just going to have it returned to square. And I'm going to have it returned as an HTTP response. Let's see what this does. I go to localhost, and in my URL pattern, I'm going to add square. Well, that returns 4 because 2 times 2 is equal to 4. Awesome. Does anyone have any questions about URL patterns and how they route to specific views? All right. In that case, could I have somebody walk me through the process of creating something that would return the area of a triangle?
Can you provide the formula for the triangle?
Yes, I'll take care of the formula.
Okay, go to URL patterns, add another path, and path, open parentheses, in quotes, triangle / comma, area, whatever you want to call the view, area of triangle. And then define the area, or define the view as def area triangle, take in the request, and then return an HTTP response, and within the parentheses, whatever the formula for the triangle is.
All right, perfect. Which in this case, we're just going to do Let's say that 5 is the height, 2 is the base, and we are going to divide that by 2. So it's base times height divided by 2. Awesome. Well, let's take a look at our triangle now. Now we can see we're getting 5.0. All right. So there's our area of our square. There's our area for a triangle. And let's take this a step further. Currently right now, I'm giving default values to this HTTP request. But what if I wanted to pass an argument within the URL pattern? Just like we see in the Poke API, Pokemon would be where the URL pattern would end, right? Well, I send the request, and I get back specific information for Pokemon. But what if I wanted to pass in arguments for square so that I could receive back a specific value? Here in the Poke API, I can send to such a thing as a name. And when I send a name, well, I get back the data regarding that Pokemon name or responding to that Pokemon name. So I want to be able to pass in arguments within my URL pattern. How do I do that? Well, inside of Square, what I can pass in is say, hey, I want there to be an integer. So there's 2 types of things that we can pass. We could either pass in integers or strings. And this colon will be what separates the parameter name. So putting it within this arrow brackets is what lets the URL patterns know, hey, this is going to be a parameter. And then we can define whether it's going to be an integer or a string. So in this case, we're going to say, I'm going to receive an integer, and I want this to be the height, and finish off my information there. Well, now how do I grab that from my area square? Well, now all I would add to my view, say height. The connection is here. So I'm passing height. So I need to make sure that my function is receiving a parameter that shares the same exact name as height. Well, let's go ahead and send that request here. I'm just going to return height as my HTTP response. So again, I'm going to pass in square. And let's do 10. I received 10 as my response. I can even do type so that I know what my type will be. Oh, it's just giving me that. Interesting. Let's do an instance. Let's pass in height and integer. And that gives me back true, because height is being determined as an integer. Well, now if I pass it in as str, which is a string, and I send my request, then it comes back as false, because this height is no longer being interpreted as an integer. It is now being interpreted as a string. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it as an integer and send my request. All right. Finally, to actually respond, I'm just going to do height squared, because this is a square. The area of a square is just base times height. So if I do it, this is going to return 100. Does anyone have any questions over how I passed that URL parameter there? Okay, awesome. If no one has any questions, then let's go ahead and work on our triangle. Our triangle, I want it to be able to take in height and a base. How would I change this URL pattern so that I can receive an integer height and an integer base?
After the
Let's hear it, Jason.
Okay, I was just gonna say pretty much throw as opposed to the same integer height, you just have the squiggly, I guess end colon height, and then the end squiggly, and then you would need pretty much the exact same thing for base.
So base.
Int height for base, wouldn't you?
Is this what you're, so I added this base portion here just to make sure that they're separate from one another and that we know which one will be height and which one will be base.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, I wasn't expecting that.
No, yeah, definitely.
Great.
But great
So
job.
adding height and base. Okay. Perfect.
So you're just doing that so we can understand it better, but it's not needed when you add like height by itself and base by itself.
Yes. Let me go ahead.
Okay.
There's not a source of confusion there.
Okay.
All right. So then how would I change this function now? Well, now I could just do height times base divided by 2. So I could do, hey, I want to send a triangle, and I need the area for a triangle that has a height of 10, a base of 5, and divide that by 2. All right, so all I did was 10 and 5. The height was 10, the base was 5. When divided by 2, we got 25. I am passing my parameters through my URL pattern and grabbing it out from my view. So a view will always accept a request and may accept URL parameters. All right. Any questions regarding URL patterns or the Django server?
regarding, go ahead, Tim.
If you had set up that triangle path, for example, with the view corresponding to it, and it was running on your server backend, you created a React application. You made a GET request where you were trying to get, you want to assign a variable to a GET request, pushing those parameters inside that request. It would store that 25.0 to the variable that you were assigning.
Yes.
Sweet. Cool. Thank you.
Of course.
Regarding like the parameter in line 35, you said like height and then base, and then in line 43, you said height and then base. Do they have to be in the exact order? Or in line 43, could you do like int base, int height, and it'll like destructure it properly?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's actually going to be able to destructure properly. So I can have these mixed up. I can say base and height. And when I send the request, it's still going to work. As long as I have the correct parameter names matching, it doesn't matter the order, as long as they exist within the function parameters. Now, let's say that I didn't name it correctly, and I pass in BAS instead of base, and then I send my request, this is going to cause a failure. Because it's going to tell me, hey, we got an unexpected keyword argument of base. So we try to pass in base into the function, and it didn't work. And this is Django just trying to be smart and say, did you mean BAS? So it's trying to give me a hint as to how to fix my URL patterns. And there you go. Any other questions? All right, if there aren't any other questions, that's going to conclude our lecture for the day. Let me go ahead and stop the recording.